So in this video, we're going to be talking about the Peloponnesian War, the catastrophic war that erupts between the Greeks themselves over the very idea of what it means to be Greek, over the direction of Greek society in the Greek future. So the Peloponnesian War takes place in installments, as it were. There is an initial undeclared Peloponnesian War, also called the First Peloponnesian War, that takes place in the middle of the century, between 460 and 446, and this is a series of conflicts between Athens' allies and Sparta's allies, and we'll talk about how that comes about in a minute. There's a gap of 30 years in between them, and then the Great Peloponnesian War, the real Peloponnesian War, the Peloponnesian War, takes place from 431 to 404, and this is the war that is that tears apart the Greek world, and is an unflagging effort to bring about victory on either side at all costs. The Spartan view of the world and the Athenian view of the world have become in some ways irreconcilable. A number of key events are along the way here. So we see the Helot rebellion in Sparta. The Helot rebellion is instrumental in bringing about the Undeclared War because it antagonizes the Spartans, but it also antagonizes the Corinthians. And what we'll see throughout this is that there's a case to be made for saying that the villain in this story is actually the Corinthians. It's the Corinthians that bring about both the Undeclared War and the main war, and drag the Spartans into it. The Helot rebellion is instrumental in turning Corinth into Athens' direct adversary. During the Undeclared War, two of the key things that are associated with Athenian imperialism take place. So it's important to note that they take place in the context of war, in the context of a tremendous conflict. The movement of the treasury for the Delian League, it's moved from the sanctuary, the Temple of Apollo, on the neutral island of Delos, and it's brought into Athens itself, and it's used by Athens in order to make itself stronger in the context of this war. The Athenians justify this by saying that they are the leaders of a military alliance, and that alliance is what is threatened by Athens and Corinth. But this is something that has been hotly debated for literally thousands of years. Also, the Athenian citizenship law, which restricts participation in Athenian political society by restricting citizenship to people who have both an Athenian father and mother. The Great Peloponnesian War, the main war, it takes place itself in chunks. And so we have partway through, we have the first roughly 10 years of the war is the Archidamian War, is the war that is characterized by how it's initially started off by Athens and Sparta, by the policy of Pericles and so forth. This is put on hold by the Peace of Nicaeus, but the Peace of Nicaeus is disrupted by the Hawks, who want war, who want Athens to come out victorious against Sparta, and the eruption of this is the Sicilian expedition, which is a turning of the tide against Athens, and ultimately leads to Athens' defeat at the hands of Sparta. Spoiler alert. After Athens is defeated, Sparta imposes an oligarchic government on Athens, which the Athenians refer to as the 30 Tyrants. And so that's the bookend of the story. So the Undeclared War, one of the reasons why the Hoplite rebellion in Sparta is so important is that Sparta has some difficulty in suppressing the Helots on this particular occasion, and they call upon their allies in the Greek world, the alliances that they formed during the Persian invasions, in order to help them out a little bit. And this includes Athens, who was allied with Sparta according to the according to the rubrics of the Hellenic alliance against Persia, the Persian invasions. And so Athens helps out Sparta, but according to its own agenda. The role that Athens has in this is to resettle the hoplites away from Sparta. The population of hoplites that engineered this rebellion is exiled from the Spartan community, and it's the Athenians that take them away. And the Athenians set them up as a colony that is an extension of Athens, and they sets them up on the northern shores of the Peloponnesian of the Peloponnesus on the at a strategic point in the Corinthian Gulf. This is the body of water that is the northern boundary of the Peloponnesus. The Corinthian Gulf is very important to the trade of Corinth, because Corinth sort of uniquely stands astride the isthmus and is becoming a commercial powerhouse, partly through being able to trade both westwardly and eastwardly. They trade westwardly through the Corinthian Gulf into the Adriatic, and undertake extensive trade with the Etruscans and the Greek colonies of Magna Graecia in the southern end of Italy and Sicily. The band of Greek colonies that is established and prosperous in the southern reaches of Italy and across into Sicily, where Syracuse has established itself as the wealthiest colony of the Greeks in the world. So Corinth sees the Corinthian Gulf as its own territory, as its own tool for the development of a very large and sophisticated trade empire. The placement of an Athenian colony made up of these ex-helots on a critical place in the Corinthian Gulf, and a place where they're able to control the movement of ships through this passage, and to bring about their own trade routes using this colony as a launching point. Corinth sees as a direct attack. Corinth sees this as an act of direct hostility on Corinth, by trying to take away its trade, by trying to attack its wealth and livelihood by commercial means. And so from this point onward, Corinth is seeking every opportunity to demonize Athens with its allies, most importantly Sparta. And as a result of this, a series of escalations take place from the Helot uprising up until the point where Corinth just starts engaging in hostile activities, military activities toward Athens, engaging in raids and scrimmages with Athens, and eventually they're able to convince Sparta to go along. This is called the Undeclared War because it's undeclared. There's no state of war, technically or diplomatically between Athens and Corinth, or Sparta and Athens. This is just a series of military actions and scrimmages and battles that are part of the hostility between Corinth and Athens. The Undeclared War goes Athens' way at first. Athens is overconfident, especially before Sparta sort of unwillingly becomes involved on behalf of its ally Corinth. But Athens overextends itself by attempting to open up a second theater of operations, by demonstrating its importance to the Greek world as a naval power, by attacking the Persians in their ports in Egypt. The Persian Empire, by this point, is ruling over Egypt, and so the Athenians attempt to make points with the rest of the Greek world by attacking the Persians in Egypt. This goes horribly awry, as the Egyptian expedition is an overextension of what the Athens is capable of, and B, it ends up being a failure because the Athenian ships are drawn, tricked into canals from which the water is then drained, and then the Persian troops are then able to simply march directly over land and set fire to the Athenian ships. And so the Egyptian expedition becomes a huge disaster, and Athens ends up having to make peace with Sparta and Corinth on the basis of status quo ante, on the way things were before. That's the best possible outcome for Athens, because they're so damaged by what happened in Egypt. What the result of this is the 30 Years' Peace. And the 30 Years' Peace essentially locks things into place. It creates a state of what we would call Cold War. And the thing about the 30 Years' Peace is that it means that everybody in the Aegean world has to take sides. Things are so polarized at this point that you have to be either an ally of Sparta or an ally of Athens. And neither side can interfere what happens within each alliance. And so each alliance becomes more and more strident about disciplining the members of its alliance, on preventing them from defecting or withdrawing from the alliance. Things become more harsh and more authoritarian within each alliance. And so this only intensifies the conflict, it only intensifies the polarization, it only makes it a matter of time before war breaks out between these two monolithic entities, between these two superpowers, the Athenian alliance and the Spartan alliance. And as it turns out, the 30 Years' Peace doesn't even last for 30 years. It goes down the drain before even half of that time has elapsed. The breakdown of the peace takes place as a result of, again, most importantly, the conflict between Corinth and Athens, as Athens continues to aggressively expand its trading power, its trading empire in the Aegean and beyond. It does this by a number of ways. Most importantly, by the establishing of more and more colonies that are special kind of colonies controlled directly by Athens. Greek colonies are supposed to be free and independent with a relationship with their mother city that is invoked mainly through connections in trade and in times of great crisis. But Athens starts to create these colonies called clericies that are directly controlled by Athens itself, that are extensions of Athenian trading power, and these are posted in very important strategically traded, commercially strategic locations, especially along the northern end of the Aegean, where a lot of trade routes go through toward trade in southern Europe and trade in the Black Sea, and so Athenian expansion becomes provocative to the Corinthians, and then we have a series of inciting events. So we have Corcyra, which is a Corinthian colony, which unusually is hostile toward its mother city. Corinth has been attempting to be controlling toward Corcyra. Corcyra is resisting this, and the problem is that Corinth is too strong for Corcyra to resist. And so we see Corcyra over here all the way on the top left. It's the purple island next to the Greek mainland, that's right next to the second bullet point. That's Corcyra. And so Corcyra is important to the Corinthians, it's important to their trade routes, and so Corinth is invested in suppressing Corcyran independence. Corcyra then seeks to gain an ally to help defend against Corinth. There's no possibility of Sparta being that ally, since Sparta and Corinth are allied. In this polarized world, the only other option is Athens. So Corcyra creates an alliance with Athens. Athens does this more or less unwillingly, but they send ships to fight on Corcyra's side against Corinth. Corinth sees this as an act of war by Athens. And so the problem then becomes that they have an ally called Pontadaia. Pontadaia is an Athenian ally, but a Corinthian colony. We see Pontediea here on one of the three fingers jutting down from the northern end of the Aegean. These are the Chalcidican Peninsula, and Pontediea is right here. It's a very important, very commercially strategic location. And so Athens becomes worried about Pontediea, that it's going to cause problems within the Athenian alliance because of its connections to Corinth. And so Athens demands that Pontediea submits to Athens. It renounce its alliance, its connection to Corinth, and to tear down its walls so that it can't possibly be a threat to the Athenian Empire. And so the Pontedians refuse, and the Athenians begin a siege of their own ally, Pontediea, in order to remove this potential threat. Once again, Corinth, construes this as a direct attack on Corinth and its through its colony. And then we have the final turn, the Megaran decrees. Megara has been changing sides back and forth. Megara is on the peninsula between Athens and the Peloponnesus, just to the east of Corinth. And Megara, by this time, has been leaning toward the Corinthian side. The facts of the case are not known, but the Athenians accuse the Megarans of farming what the Athenians refer to as sacred land within Attica, and they retaliate by issuing Megaran decrees that say that Megara cannot trade in the Athenian agora or in the marketplaces of its allies. And this is propaganda is involved in painting this throughout the Greek world as starving the Megarans, that they're not able to trade at all in all the important places in the Greek world. And as a result, the Megarans are undergoing immense suffering. Corinth uses this as the final straw to say that Athens must be stopped. And so this time Corinth brings about a declaration of war by Sparta against Athens, and this brings about the start of war, of a war that people didn't know how it was going to turn out. Nobody expected that this would be a war that would last for, across 3 decades, that would be so destructive, so consuming of men and resources. Everybody expected that it would be resolved in a fairly quick way, but the problem is that part of the problem is that the polarization had brought feelings to such an intensity that ordinary pursuit of war would not resolve things. People needed to actually defeat and humiliate their enemy to an extent far beyond previous conflicts between the Greek states. And this is between Sparta and Athens, who have diametrically opposed strengths and weaknesses. So if you look at Athens, Athens is very strong at sea, but it's not very strong on land compared to Sparta. It has a tremendous amount of wealth, but it's very difficult to convert that rapidly into military success. Sparta is the undisputed advantage on land, but it has next to nothing on sea. And so, since Sparta is well inland, there's no way for these two adversaries to fight each other, to bring their strengths to bear against each other. Athens can't really attack Sparta at sea. Even blockade is not particularly important against Sparta because Sparta doesn't have a great deal of seagoing trade. Likewise, the Spartan army can't attack the Athenian navy, and so the war begins with a state of conflict that is extremely difficult to resolve, and this is what takes it 26 years to bring it to its final turn. Pericles' strategy is to bring the population of Attica within the walls of Athens. which essentially defangs the Spartan military. The storied Spartan phalanx is one that would be extremely difficult for the Athenian military to defeat. If the Athenians marched to war against the Spartans, chances are very good they would be defeated. And so the Athenian strategy is to avoid having to fight this impossible to defeat army. And the way that they do that is to withdraw within the walls. And so the first few years involve the Spartan army marching into Attica, and all that they're able to do is burn some crops or whatever, and then they have to go home at the end of the campaign season. Meanwhile, the population of Attica is safe within the walls of Athens, and they're able to go home at the end. This is effective in preventing Sparta from gaining victory in battle. It has an unexpected side effect, which is that cities in the ancient world are not intended to hold vast numbers of people. Cities are centers of trade, and the place where skilled laborers ply their trade and practice. But the vast majority of populations throughout the ancient world live outside the cities in the countryside. And so cities are not designed to handle these large numbers of people. The sanitation involved simply isn't there. The ancient world doesn't have sewers. It doesn't have means of large amounts of waste disposal. And this includes huge numbers of human beings and all of their animals. Horses and oxen and chicken and so forth and so on, that are all producing waste within these walls, all spreading disease in ways that the ancients don't understand. And so we come to the point of huge numbers of Athenians are dying in droves as a result of this plague. The plague of Athens has a profound effect on Athens, both directly in taking away their manpower, but also in disillusioning them. They begin to lose faith in the gods. And to question the future of Athens itself. And so the demoralization that happens as a result of the plague of Athens, which is symbolized by the death of Pericles himself to plague, leaves Athens vulnerable in the psychic sense, in the emotional sense, and divides it and undermines its confidence, which comes to play in later events. So the war, as it turns out, becomes indecisive, and the Spartans are able to make headway primarily by persuading the allies of Athens, who have been chafing under Athenian rule, to turn over to the Spartan side. And so but nobody is able to bring about a decisive victory. And so they agree to the Peace of Nicaea. Sparta and Athens agree to a peace between them that sort of returns things to the way they were, but doesn't resolve the state of war. There's still a conflict, especially since Corinth rejects the treaty and maintains a state of war with Athens. But Sparta is the arm, is the fist of the Corinthian Spartan alliance. Everybody sort of holds back for a couple of years and tries to figure out what to do. In the interim, a lot of things take place that sort of set the stage for the next events. Athens is very famously or notoriously engages in the oppression of Milos, which is a island community that had been in the distant past founded by Sparta, but which is neutral in the conflict. Athens lands on Milos and demands that they submit to Athens. Milos refuses, and so Athens takes Milos, tears down its city, and sells its women and children to slavery, and wipes out its male population, all in the interest of preventing a a location that isn't all that even particularly important strategically from potentially being a base of Spartan operations. This goes a long way toward convincing the rest of the Greek world that Athens is becoming more and more intensely problematic, is more and more intensely imperialist. At Athens itself, we have Alcibiades. Alcibiades is attempting to foment an aggressive posture by Athens in the middle of the Peace of Nicias, and eventually he gets his way. He's very persuasive. He is sort of a firebrand, and also has a sensual appeal to a large population of the Athenian nobility. He is very beautiful and has his way with both male and female members of the aristocracy. Alcibiades uses his wiles to convince the people in Athens to ramp up its war, to engage in a two-front war with Sparta by opening up a new theater of war in Sicily. And so, if Athens is able to establish itself in Sicily, this means that they would be able to fight Sparta on two fronts. So this is history repeating itself. This is Athens doing the same thing it had done in the Undeclared War, overextending itself just at the moment when it might have had an advantage. The Sicilian expedition is a huge disaster, even more so than the Egyptian one. The ships and men that Athens sent to Sicily are wiped out. And this, in combination with what happens next, spells the end for Athens. Alcibiades is summoned home before the Sicilian expedition is even able to land in Sicily, and he's summoned home to stand trial for religious crimes. And so, as a result, he defects to the Spartan side. And he recommends the two things that make Spartan victory possible: a permanent Spartan base in Athens, which is when in Attica, which is Decelea. Decelea is used as a base to harass the Atticans and the Athenians constantly throughout the year, not just during the campaign season. And so this dramatically weakens Athens' position on land. And then the second thing is the only way that Sparta can truly defeat Athens is at sea. And so with the recommendation of Alcibiades, Sparta engages in an alliance with Persia in order to get a contribution of Persian ships to create a Spartan fleet, which ultimately defeats the weakened and divided Athenians at the Battle of Aegispotamon. And so, as a result, the Spartans are weakened in their status with the rest of the Greeks as a result of their alliance with Persia, their willingness in exchange for the ships to allow Persia to retake control of the Greek communities on the western shores of Anatolia. The rest of the Greek world holds this against Sparta, but Athens has also demonstrated its arrogance and imperialism, its oppression of its allies. The whole thing has tended to disillusion the whole of the Greek world against both of these great leaders. The Peloponnesian War has cost the Greek world an immense amount. It's wrecked the economy. It's depopulated the cities that are involved as warriors fought each other for almost an entire generation, really. And the huge amount of expensive resources and everything else has left Greece permanently weakened, all the more so because now it's become sort of expected and established that there will be a hegemon. The next century becomes a series of wars over who will be a hegemon over the Greeks. This comes to play in the 4th century crisis that we'll be discussing later on. And for now, that's that.